Hello everyone, my name is Amit, and today I'm going to take a session on CSS Grid. In this session, we will cover the whole concept of CSS Grid properties, and how to use them, coding along with couple of demos so that we can see all the properties in action. So we'll start with what is CSS Grid. So this is a basic overview of CSS Grid. So CSS Grid is a brand new module that brings two-dimensional grid system to CSS. First, we have the one-dimensional, which is Flexbox, but this grid, the CSS Grid, is two-dimensional grid system, which is introduced in CSS. CSS Grid offers a grid-based layout system with rows and columns, making it easier to design web pages, eliminating the use of float and positioning. CSS Grid helps us to write less, more readable, and logical code to design complex layouts. Also, CSS Grid works very well with Flexbox, where Flexbox can handle one-dimensional layout and grids can handle two-dimensional layout. This can help us to avoid using of CSS frameworks like Bootstrap and others, because CSS is now a framework itself. So now we will look into an high-level overview of CSS Grid terminology, how it works on the container level. So if you see in this diagram, just like CSS Flexbox, how we have Flex container and Flex items, in CSS Grid we have the same grid container and grid items. The area wrapping all the grid items in a grid container, and all these uh, uh, are called grid items. The main difference is there is two-dimensional, which is the row axis, and the column axis from the Flexbox, where we only have one-dimensional. So this is the overview of the grid container layout. Now we will see what is inside the grid items, how it looks inside the grid container. So this is the grid container. Inside the grid containers, we have this grid cells. Okay, each single cells inside the grid container are called grid cells or grid items. This grid lines, if you see this line and this line over here, these are the vertical and horizontal grid lines which divides the grid in columns and rows, and they are automatically numbered. If you see here the numbers, they are automatically numbered for columns as well as for the rows, starting from 1 all the way to the number of the row plus 1. So if you see if you see for the columns, so 1, 2, 3 columns and plus 1 is 4. Meaning, if you see here, 1 is for the starting and 4 is for the ending. The area between these two vertical and horizontal lines are called grid areas. This line and this line is called grid area. The space between grid cells are called gutter or grid gap. The grid items in a row or in the columns are called grid tracks. This is the grid tracks for the row, and this is the grid track for the column. So this was the high-level overview of how grid system terminology is there in CSS. Now we will understand how to create grid and define rows, columns, and gaps, so we can see all this CSS terminology in action. So I will, for explaining all this terminology and start using the CSS Grid, I will make a quick demo. And for that demo, I will use Firefox. And inside the Firefox, I will use CodePen, so that we can see all the changes here by itself. So for this demo, I have one basic HTML code over here. It has container, and it has 6 items inside it. And for the container, this is a basic CSS which gives it background color, width, and margin 0 and auto, so that it stays in the middle. Then for the items, we are giving some basic CSS properties so that it looks good, and it can differentiate with the different colors. Okay. So now for converting elements into a grid container, we use display grid. For defining rows and columns, we use grid template row, which defines the number of row and grid template columns, which defines the number of columns in grid layout. So we will define it over here. So grid template rows. So we can give rows 156. We want two rows, 150 pixel and 150 pixels. So there will be two rows if you see here. And if we want to define the grid columns, so it should be so you see here. These are the grid rows. We have defined two rows of 150 pixels and three columns of 150 pixels. And if you want some gap in between these rows, we can use grid row gap, which defines the gap between the rows. I will give it 20 pixels. So you see this is the gap in the between the rows, and grid column gap. Also we can use to give a gap between the columns. So this is how it works. But what we can give different two rows and different two columns also. So but for defining, but if we want to make it single value, so we can also give a shortened property grid row. So it will take for grid gap. So it will take for columns as well as for the row. So now for understanding the grid terminology overview, so I just need to inspect this and I'll just show you. So this is the grid container. You can see the grid over here. If I click on this container, so you can see. So these are the grid container. And if you see here, these are the two rows and three columns, which we have defined using the grid using these properties. Now, if we want the gap between, you see the gap between these rows and columns are grid gap or gutter. The items inside the grid are called grid items. These items are grid items or grid cell. This is the row axis, which is called track or row track, and this is the column axis, which is called and the y axis, which is called the column track. And these area, if you see these four lines over here, so the area between this horizontal and vertical line, this area is called grid gap. Grid area. And now these we have defined three columns. So 150 pixels by three columns. But if you see 1, 2, 3, and here it is the 4. So 1 is for the starting and 4 is for the ending. So this was the terminology and the grid property which we saw in the previous slide. So until now we have defined these rows, and these columns using this pixels values. We can do it better by using this repeat function. So the repeat function in CSS Grid is used to represent a fragment of the track list, allowing a large number of columns or rows that exhibit a recurring pattern to be written in more compact way. Okay, so this means, for example, if you can say here we have three columns, which is 150 pixels. Now, if I want to, let's say, make it five columns, so I need to add 150 pixels, 150 pixel again. So now then it will become five columns. So what we can do here, we can use the repeat function over here. So repeat. So we can give three, comma, and we can give 150 pixels over here. So you see, this is how we can use the repeat function. Also, we can now change the number over here by 5. So it will take the 5 columns. So this is how we can use the repeat functions over. And let's say if you want these two columns to be 150 pixel and this last column to be 300 pixels. So what we can do is we can change it to 2 to 150 pixel and this last one to be 300 pixel like this. So now if you can see, if I inspect this, So this is 300 pixels, and these two, if you see, is 150 pixels, as we have defined in rows and columns. So again, until now we have used this one pixels value over here. We can also there is there is a new unit which is defined in CSS Grid, which is the FR unit. So it automatically calculates layout division when adjusting for gaps inside the grid. So what we can do is we will change it again to 150 pixels. Okay. Now, if you can see, there is a gap over here, white space over here. So if you want it to fill all the gaps which is available over here, so in the similar thing which we have in Flexbox, where we can use Flex one, it would occupy the available space. But we in Grid we can use this FR unit. So if I give one FR over here, so it will take all the available space which is over here, which is there available over here, avoiding the white space. It will occupy all the width which is available. Okay, so this is the how one FR is used, and we can also use one FR in different situations. Like if you want the first one to be one FR, second one to be two FR, third one to be one FR. So now the grid will distribute it as like that. First and third will take one FR, and second one will take two FR. So this is how we can use the FR unit in CSS Grid. It will take the two times space in the grid. Also, we can use the percentage value. For example, if say we want one FR, and last one should be 50 pixels. So it will distribute like that. If you see first one, second one, and the last one will be 500. So we have set this to 1000 pixel width container. So now it is 500 pixels. So this is how repeat function and one FR unit is work in CSS Grid. So now we will see the positioning and spanning, how it works in CSS Grid. Okay. Right now, all the grid items are laid according to their source order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What if you want to change the positioning of our first grid item and place it over this fifth grid item? So for that positioning, what we can use this lines which is provided for the rows and columns in the grid. So we can use the grid row start and grid row end property to align it on the different row. So how I will do that is, I will take this first one, okay, and I will use this property grid row start, okay, and the rows I want to this first one to be on the fifth one, so it should be in the second row, right? So the grid will start on the second line, okay, and grid will end on the third line. If I do, it will end on the third line. So if you see, the first one is already on the second line. So and if you want that it to be, but also we can use the shorten property for this start and end, which is grid row. So it works like 2/3. So if I do this, then this also works. So this is for the rows, and for the columns, it is similar to the rows. Grid column start. So the column is 2. Here the line number is 2. So it is starting from 2 and grid column end. And it is ending at 3. Okay. You see, the fifth one, the first one is now set on the fifth item, grid item. And here also we can use the shorten property for this grid column. The start is 2 and the end is 3. So this is how we can position our grid items from one cell to another. Now, if there is one more shorthand for this grid column and grid row, so which is this grid area, and this the how it works is grid area. The syntax is row start, starting of the row, which is 2, and starting of the column, which is also 2, and ending of the row, which is 3, and end of the column, which is 3. So this is how this works. This shorthand property also works over here. So we can use grid row, grid columns, or also we can use grid area. Grid area also used with grid template, grid auto rows, which will be covered in further slides. Now, if until now what we have done is we have placed single items in a single cell. What if you want to span grid items into multiple grid cells or to occupy the entire area? So we can do this in CSS Grid by using these grid items only. So I'll just comment this. Okay, I'll open this grid row. Okay, so I'll change this grid row to it should be on the top only. And now I'll just comment this grid column. I want this to take from 1 to 2. This occupies 2 cells. So I'll start with 1 and I can end at 3. So now you see it occupies these 2 cells. This is how we can do that. There is another way we can do that is we can use the span property over here. So span 2. So it will now occupy the 2 space. We can also do span 3. So it will occupy the whole row which is available over there. Okay. But what if we want to there is another property if you want to occupy all the space which is available, this which is -1. So this is how you can use the numbers like 1 2 3, or you can span it to 2, or you can use the -1 property if you want to occupy the whole area. This is how the positioning and the spanning in grid CSS grid works. Okay. Now what I'll do is we'll make this quick demo, and then I'll share with you more techniques how to do this spanning and positioning of grid items. So for this I have a code. So this is a challenge code. I'll just paste it over here, and I'll remove all this. So these are the basic things. What I have done is the width and margin, and for all the inner child, I have did it background color and some the initial styling. Now what we want to do is to convert it. It is in this like this. It seems to be difficult, but it is more easier with CSS Grid. So now, as per the demo, we can see there are 4 rows. Okay, so we will define 4 rows. So for that, so I would give the first one, the header part 100 pixels, the boxes 200 pixels, the main content 300 pixels, and the footer to be 100 pixels. Okay, so if and for grid template rows column. So there are also 4 rows, 4 columns. Okay, so first one. Uh, for boxes, I will give 200 pixels. Sorry, I will use repeat functionality. So 3 into 200 pixels, and for the last sidebar, I would give 100 pixels. Okay. So now, if you can see this is come into action. So if I inspect this, if I click on the grid, you see all the rows and columns are defined. We see this empty cells. Now we just want to fill this empty cells with by using positioning and span, which we have learned using the line which is provided by CSS Grid. So for the header, we want it to have all the full width. So grid column, and we can use 1 comma -1 so that it can have the whole width over here. So you see it is taking the full width. Now for the main content, we want the boxes are aligned, 1, 2, 3 boxes are aligned. The main content is over here. So we have to place the main content over here in this row, third row, and this column. Okay. So now the main content is over here. So the third row and the fourth row it should end, and the column it should take 1 to 4 because we have this sidebar over here. Now for the sidebar, we want to span it to 2 cells like this. We have to the boxes and the main content. So for that we can use grid row. It should start from 2, okay, and then span 2. So it is spanning here from here. Maybe I should decrease some font size so then it can be easier to see. Okay, I change it to 1FR. So now the header boxes, the sidebar is there, and this is the main content. And for the footer, the same as for the header. It would take grid column 1, and for separating it, we should give some grid gap so that we can see it easier. Now you see, this is looking exactly as this, like by using only grid line numbers which is there and this much of code. So this is how powerful CSS Grid is. So we can define so much thing in just a small amount of code and small amount of time. Now, until we have used only this grid lines, okay, to designing that this CSS grid. What we can do is we can also name grid lines. We can so for we can name this proper names for, as per the content for the better understanding. We will change this names or line and we can use this names which we will give to the lines to this grid columns and grid row properties apart from using this 1 and -1 and this grid line numbers. Okay, so for giving this grid line names, we use this syntax which is under this brackets. Okay, so it is like we will give for the rows the header, box, main content, and this footer. So we will use, I will use header start like this. Okay, so it is starting from here, and then after this I can use header end. And this is also starting of the boxes, right? So also we can use give two names inside this. So it is box start, box end, and here the main starts, right? So main start, main end, and here the footer start, right? Footer start, and here footer. So this is how we can give names to our rows, okay? And we can use these names in our say, properties, okay? So for the main content, we have changed for the columns, right? So for the rows, right? So this is three. So which is the third one is here box end, right? We have given this name box end over here, box end. So which is box end and main start, box end and so you see, we can give the names to the grid lines and also use this names as like this. So this is an example of how we can use the grid line names. Okay, and also we can do this and we can do the same things for all the things where the columns are there, where the rows are there. So this is an example how we can do that, and the same thing we can do with the columns. But if you see, there is a catch over here. We have used this repeat function, so we can't give it outside here, or because it will only take from outside of the repeat function. So for that, we can give it after we have what number of repeat function what we have given, right? We can give over here. So we can give it like call start. I name it call start. Okay, and here we can give call end. Yes. So now what CSS Grid will do is, so it will it will take this name call start and call end, but it will give it more specific things like call start one, then it will end to call start one, and then call end one, and then call start two and call end one. The CSS Grid will take care of it. So here I will give grid end. Okay. So now we can use this columns also. So for the columns, right, like this. So call start one, okay, and we can use -1, but also we can use grid end for demonstrative purposes. I'm showing you this, okay. Yes. So you see, this is how we can give names line names to grid and columns, and we can use it like this. Okay. Now, one more thing we can do is we can name the area, name the grid areas. Okay. So for naming the grid areas, what we can do is we can use this property grid template areas. Okay, and then we have to define a string of what are the area names. So we have to be specific about the area names so that we can use that grid area property over there, which and you so we have to give string of names like for now I will give head, 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 and head. Okay, then second one is box, 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 and the third one, fourth one is side, right? Then again we have the main, main, and then the side, right? And then for the footer, again we have footer, right? So inside this foot, 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 foot. Okay. So this is how we give our template area names, and now we can use these names for to assign it to our head, like this. For the header, we will use this property, grid area property, which we have used previously, right? So grid area. So I'll define it as head. So it is a head. right? So you see, it is working as expected. So this is how we can use the line number, give the line number names, and also we can define this grid the template area so that we can use it in our contents, so that we can use any of these three technique as our requirement. So this is how we can use name grid lines and use them and grid areas and use them. So now for the other slide. So for this is an explicit grid and implicit concept in CSS Grid. For this, we will see an example. Okay, so here is the demo code. Okay, and this is some basic features over here. Okay, so now if we want, okay, so now if we want, what we will do is we will give make it grid display grid. Okay, we will learn all these concepts by using demo so that we can understand it better in how it works in grid template. Okay. So here, if you can see, okay, here if you can see, I have defined only two rows, this row and this row. Okay. Okay. So if you see, we have defined four cells, 1, 2, 3, 4, with two rows and two grids, which is occupying the four rows. This is called explicit grid, meaning in CSS grid. Okay. And the other four is defined implicitly using CSS by automatically added to the CSS grid. So we can we can add fit this remaining styles in two row text, which is manually added in the grid rows, which is called the implicit grid. So the grid which we have defined like this in the row, two rows. This is called the explicit grid, and which we have not defined, but it is automatically defined. That is called the implicit grid concept in grid. Okay. Now what if you want to. Acha, I was missing rows actually. Okay, okay. My bad. So if I comment this out, you can see we have given the 200 pixels to this row, right? But here it is not taking any CSS, right? Because this is the implicit grid. sorry for that. So this is how we can differentiate what is implicit and what is explicit. Also, there is a line over here. There is a solid line over here which is covering the explicit grid, and there is dotted lines over here which covers the explicit grid. So for by using this grid auto rows properties, we can give so this is how yeah, this is how we can give the implicit grid CSS. This the same thing. Now we will say that it is coming in. Why it is always coming in the row? Because this is the default behavior of grid. So for changing it for to row to column, what we can do is we can use this property grid auto flow. So now by default it is row. We can change this to column. Okay, now you see it is coming inside a column. It is coming in here. So these two are the explicit and this is the implicit grid. Okay, and now for styling this row implicit grid also, we can use grid auto columns. This rows and column explicit columns and implicit columns. This is how we can do that. Okay. So this is the concept of explicit and implicit grid and grid. Now aligning items in grid. Okay. We have learned now we have learned how to style the implicit and explicit grid. Now we will learn the different ways how we can align grid items into grid cells or grid area. Okay. So for that, what I'll do is I'll remove this. I'll do this. Also, I will make this rows a little smaller so that you can see them. Okay. If I inspect this, okay. Uh, it, okay. This cells it is occupying this space. The padding also low. So Flexbox, we also have justify align items and justified items property in CSS Grid. So we can use justify content here. Sorry, align items first. Align items, and also we can use center. Now you see there's the items inside the cell are center aligned. Okay. Now, by default, like Flexbox, it is stretch. Okay, but we can use center, start, and end. Okay, so this is how we can use this align items in CSS Grid. Also, CSS Grid is two-dimensional, so we have justify items, which is not there in CSS Grid, Flexbox. So here we can do start, center. I'll do center, justify items and align items. Okay. So this is vertical and horizontally center inside this grid cell. So this is how grid items and justify items work in CSS Grid. Okay. Now we will see align self and align and justify self. Uh, uh, so it is also there in Flexbox. So same thing is over here. So align self. It will override the align items and justify self will override the align justify items. Okay. So we can give the same properties over here. So the align items. So we can give it start. Okay. So all the items are aligned to the start, or we can give end. So it is aligned as per the axis, and we can give justify cell. So we can give justify cell start, so it will move to the left, and we can give end, so it will move on the right. So this is how just align items, justify items, align self, and justify self works in CSS Grid. Now, what we have done is only for the grid cells or grid item inside the grid cells. Okay, for the now what if we want to align in the whole container? So what we can do is I'll just give it the height of 1000 pixels. Okay, now there is a blank space over here, and also I'll change it to 100 pixels so that we can see it properly. Okay, 100, 200. Okay, so now if I on the container, if I give justify content center, so it is center. Okay, I remove this. Okay, and also align it. For justify content center, we can use center and start, space around, space between, all the properties which is there in flex. Okay, so this is for justify content, and for align content. So now you see it is in between, vertical and horizontal aligned between the whole container inside the whole content inside the container. Okay, so this is how justify content and align content works in CSS Grid. Now we will move on to min max and min max, minimum content, maximum content, and min max functionality in CSS Grid. So for that we have this demo. So this is the last part which we have min max, and we have uh, autofill and autofit. So I'll just cover it faster. So here we have the basic CSS and basic HTML. Okay, so okay, so for this what we will do is we'll convert it to grid. Okay, then we will give grid template rows. So I'll give one FR, one FR, one FR, and one FR. Okay, so this all taking one FR. Yes. So what if I want to, you know, make this take the minimum height of the content? So for that, or the maximum height of the content. So for that, what we can do is we can use the max height, max content over here. Okay, so you see this column is taking the maximum content. The modern word should be fit into that. So that much it is only taking. And also we can use what will it is now the flexbox word is small, and but this cell is very much bigger. So what if you want to take this flexbox word to only the minimum content which is there? So for that we can use the min content. So you see, it is taking only the minimum content, minimum space which is required over there. Also, so this is how we can use the min content and max content inside our columns. Also, what we can do is, if what we want is our this rows should be minimum 150 pixel, and the maximum minimum should be 150 pixel and maximum can be 1 fr. Okay, or the minimum content which is there. Okay, so what we can do is we can use this rows over here, and we can define a min max function over here. So it should be 150 pixel or the minimum content. So now you can see 150 pixels is mandatory. It will take 150 pixels only. If I show you, inspect and show you. So you see here 150 pixels it is taking. Okay. So this is what min max functions does. It takes the minimum to 150 pixel and maximum to the minimum content which is there. So this is the how min max function works in minimum content also works, maximum content works, and min max functions we can use in CSS Grid to give the minimum content height, minimum content width, and the size range greater than or equal to minimum or less than or equal to maximum. So this is how the min-max functions work, and minimum content, maximum content, min-max functions works in CSS Grid. Now we will use this example to demonstrate the autofill and autofit property. So I will make this container, so it is 1000 pixel. So I'll make this column to repeat 4 into 1 fr. Okay. Okay. So now again it is like that. So what if you want to, you know, uh, what if I want this? There should be 8 tracks over here. So we have explicitly defined this 4 tracks. So for defining the 8 tracks, we have to define it here 8 tracks over here. So it will take the 8 tracks. Okay. But what we want to don't want to define this. It should automatically take. What if this one increases? So we again have to define 9 over here, right? So what we want to define it dynamically, so that for that we can use this autofill property over here in Grid. Okay, so this is the autofill property here in uh, Grid. This will autofill it. If I add one more over here, so it will autofill it. Okay, so it will be added over here. So this is how the autofill property over here for adding it side by side. Also, we can use the autofit property. Okay, so the main difference between autofit and autofill is, okay, I'll just show you over here by inspecting. You can see you can see that if you think that it is making only 8 columns, but not it is not the case. It is making the 10 columns over here because our width is 1000 pixel of the container, and it width of the autofill is columns is 100 pixels. So what it is doing, it is making what it is doing is it is making 10 columns instead of 8 columns. So what we want not to use this, and then we will use the autofit one, so that it will only create 8 columns over here. You see, it will leave one empty this empty space over here. It will not create this two one. It will leave it. So this is the main difference between the autofit and autofill. So here for the empty cells also, now for the empty columns also, it will assign space to it. But the autofit does not does that. It will not assign you know width to the empty space. So this is how we can do it for autofit and autofill. So for making it responsive, so what we can do is we can use autofit, and also we can use the min-max function over here. So what I'll do is I'll make it 100 pixel minimum, okay, because we have 1000 pixel content, and the maximum should be 1 FR. Okay, now you see it took all the space over here by using this 1 FR, and if you inspect over here, and it can show you. So all this is 125 pixels because we have bigger grid over here. We have 1280. So what I'll do is I'll make this width to 90%. So now this is a fluid layout, right? So you see now we have 110 because the width is greater. If I make it smaller, okay. So now you see it shifted to the second row. Okay, so this is how we can use responsive in CSS Grid using autofit without writing any single piece of media query. If I go more down, whenever the space is less, so what it will do is it will make it fit to the, it will make new rows and it will fit to that. If I go more down, so you see now there is three. If I move down two, and in mobile devices, you can say it can be one. So you see, this is how AutoFit and Autofill works in CSS Grid for making responsive layouts also without having to write any single piece of media queries. Uh, so I think this is it for all the properties which is there in CSS Grid, which I can explain in short period of time. So if there is any question, so you can let me know.
Hi guys, thank you for watching. I had an amazing time learning all the new things here at Specbee's TechX. And if you did too, do let us know in the comments below. Keep following Specbee for the latest trends in technology. See you in the next one.